South Asia, two nuclear neighbors, and for 4 incredibly tense days back in May 2025, honestly, the world was just holding its breath. Tensions between India and Pakistan really boiled over.
Oh, absolutely. It was their most serious military crisis in decades, and frankly, a period of just profound confusion.
Yeah.
So much misinformation flying around, wasn't there?
Exactly. Trying to figure out what actually happened is, well, it's extremely challenging. And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We're trying to cut through some of that fog, and we're using a specific working paper that attempts to piece together those 4 days, relying only on the evidence it presents.
Right. So we're unpacking the conflict's path, the key military moves, the political dynamics, all filtered through this paper's analysis. And look, this wasn't just your typical border skirmish.
Not at all. The
Yeah.
paper really highlights military actions that crossed some significant thresholds, hitting targets much deeper inside Pakistan than we had seen in, over 50 years.
Yes, in 71. And crucially, you've got nuclear states involved. It gave us this really concerning glimpse into how modern tech shapes conflict now, kind of echoing things we've seen in Ukraine or Azerbaijan.
And it's also a really vital case study, isn't it, for understanding how modern Chinese military systems perform. Things like the AQ-9 air defense, the PL-15 missile, the J-10 fighter jet.
Definitely. Their potential combat debut here, well, that's something military analysts worldwide are watching very, very closely. It just underscores why South Asia remains such a critical flashpoint.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Where did it all actually start? What was the spark?
Well, the paper points directly to that terrorist attack on April 22nd, 2025 in Pahalgam, Kashmir.
Pahalgam, that's a tourist spot, right?
It is, and it killed 26 tourists. The paper notes the provocative nature, targeting civilians, and specifically reports mentioned Hindu men being targeted.
And this happened just as India was really pushing this narrative of normalcy returning to Kashmir after the big changes in 2019. So this attack just directly challenged that whole idea.
Absolutely. And, given India's history of responding, think Uri, Pulwama, a pretty significant strike back was, well, widely expected.
But it wasn't immediate military action, was it? The paper shows they tried other things first. Diplomatic, economic signals like putting the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance.
That's right, on April 23rd. And Pakistan's reaction to that, it was swift and strong. They called it an act of war the very next day. That really ramped up the tension immediately.
Okay, so after those signals, the military response came on May 7th.
Yeah, 15 days after the initial attack. India launched what it called punitive airstrikes, hitting 9 sites. Now, 7 were near the line of control, probably hit by artillery or maybe drones.
But the paper flags 2 strikes deep inside Pakistani Punjab, near mid-Gimbahalapur. Those were the really significant ones.
Hugely significant. Like we said, first time striking that deep inside Pakistan proper, outside Kashmir, since the 1971 war. It was a deliberate strategic signal, basically saying geographic safe havens were over. They used weapons like the BrahMos cruise missile debris, confirmed that.
And the claims afterwards were conflicting. India claimed high terrorist casualties. Pakistan said civilians died?
Right, and the paper kind of questions India's high numbers, suggesting Pakistan likely had warning, maybe time to evacuate those sites.
Yeah.
So the analysis leans towards those deep strikes being more about coercive signaling, showing capability, showing resolve, rather than causing mass casualties.
But that signal, well, it didn't de-escalate things. Pakistan hit back within hours on May 7th.
They did. Claim they shot down 6 Indian Air Force jets. Now, the paper's analysis, looking at the evidence, suggests the number was likely up to 4. Wreckage from a Rafale and a Mirage 2000 was found inside India.
Wait, Indian jets shot down over their own territory? That's the mystery the paper highlights, isn't it?
That's the big question. The paper speculates it could be related to the electronic warfare environment, maybe jamming, things like that, or potentially issues with the pilot's situational awareness. Hard to know for sure.
And the Chinese weapons angle.
Well, the evidence suggests debris consistent with a Chinese PL-15 air-to-air missile was found. And there was apparently a U.S. official report pointing towards the Chinese-made J-10 fighter potentially being involved. Now, India denies any PL-15 hits, but just the potential successful use of these modern Chinese systems in combat, that's globally significant.
So the paper kind of frames May 7th as this missed opportunity, a missed off-ramp.
Yeah, it seems Pakistan felt their initial response wasn't enough to sort of restore deterrence.
Yeah.
So the conflict didn't stop there, it kept going.
And that meant things heated up along the line of control.
Oh, yes. The 2021 ceasefire just completely collapsed. Intense firing erupted. The paper says no territory changed hands, but tragically many civilians died near the border villages. It suggests over 50 deaths, likely the majority of the conflict's total casualties. Just awful.
And beyond the Lost Sea itself, the fight quickly became about air power, drones, missiles.
Exactly, which led to these sort of drone duels. Pakistan started launching drones and missiles into India, hitting multiple locations from May 7th onwards.
Pakistan denied it at first, right? But the paper says the evidence is pretty clear. Videos, debris.
Unequivocal, yeah. India claimed these were pretty basic, maybe poor quality drones, possibly Turkish, and they said their air defenses were largely effective, causing minimal damage, which the paper's evidence seems to back up.
So then India countered Pakistan's drone attacks.
Yes, framing their own strikes on May 8th as a direct response to the drones. They went after Pakistan's air defense radars and systems. And again, evidence like debris from Israeli Harop loitering munitions and British Banshee target drones was found. Pakistan actually acknowledged hits and damage at one radar site.
And the paper notes this dangerous perception gap developing.
Right, because if Pakistan is publicly denying launching drones, then India's counterstrikes, which India sees as a calibrated response, could easily be framed inside Pakistan as unprovoked aggression. That kind of gap is really risky in a crisis.
Which all built up to that really intense night of May 9th going into May 10th.
That was the peak violence. It was characterized by standoff strikes using longer-range weapons, hitting military sites. India struck deep again, hitting Nur Khan Air Base near Rawalpindi. That's significant because it's close to Pakistan's Strategic Plans Division, the SPD, which handles their nuclear arsenal.
And other sites, too.
Oh yeah, at least 11 sites in total, according to the paper. Other air bases, command centers, more air defense systems. India framed these as, again, calibrated responses showing they could get through Pakistani defenses.
And there was confirmation of damage.
Yes, satellite imagery confirmed damage, things like cratered runways, damaged hangars, visible at several air bases India named. Not necessarily crippling damage, but definite significant hits showing capability.
What about Pakistan's actions during that same intense night?
They ramped up their firepower too.
Yeah.
Using larger drones, apparently Turkish Yeha-3s, and more short-range ballistic missiles, the Thade and Fade-2 systems. Pakistan even posted launch videos online.
And what were their claims about damage to Indian bases?
Pakistan claimed major damage at around 15 Indian air bases. India acknowledged some drone damage at 4 sites and acknowledged missile attacks hitting bases in Punjab. But they didn't really detail the extent of the damage publicly.
But the paper points out a key asymmetry in the evidence.
It does, and this is interesting. While India's strikes left clear visible damage confirmed by satellite photos, the paper found a sort of surprising lack of comparable visible damage at the Indian bases. Pakistan claimed it hit hard with ballistic missiles.
Which implies
What?
intercepts, misses.
It suggests that many, perhaps even all, of Pakistan's ballistic missiles were either intercepted by Indian air defenses or maybe missed their targets. India, for its part, claims they intercepted all of them.
What about the S-400, the big Russian air defense system India has?
Yeah, its exact role is still a bit murky, according to the paper. Debris consistent with S-400 interceptor missiles was found, suggesting it was used to some extent. Pakistan claimed they destroyed an S-400 component at an Ampur air base, but the paper finds little public evidence right now to back up that specific claim.
So if you had to sum up the key military takeaways from the paper's analysis.
Well, a major one seems to be India's apparent success with air and missile defense, especially against drones. The paper suggests India learned quickly from recent conflicts like Ukraine and Azerbaijan, but Pakistan also showed new drone capabilities, creating this kind of dynamic, these dueling innovations. Though the paper suggests India's adaptation seemed to perform better overall in this very short conflict.
Okay, so after all that intensity, how did it finally stop?
It's almost paradoxical, isn't it?
Right.
The sheer violence of that last night, May 9th, 10th, seems to have actually created the space for diplomacy to work. And the U.S. role appears absolutely central here. U.S. concern apparently peaked before that final night of heavy strikes around May 9th morning U.S. time.
Why then specifically?
The paper cites reports of some alarming intelligence, potentially detecting changes related to Pakistani nuclear readiness indicators. Nothing concerned publicly, but that reportedly prompted Vice President Vance to make a crucial call to Prime Minister Modi.
And Secretary Rubio's involvement.
Crucial, yes. On May 9th, stretching into the 10th, he had a key call with Pakistan's powerful army chief, General Asim Munir. The report suggests Rubio offered U.S. help for future, constructive talks, basically, an inducement to stop the fighting now.
And Pakistan agreed to that.
It seems General Munir agreed to a ceasefire around 8 a.m. Pakistan time on May 10th. The paper suggests the reasons were likely a mix. The military pressure from India's successful strikes, definitely strong U.S. persuasion, but also maybe Pakistan feeling they'd shown enough resolve already.
Was India also ready to stop?
India had publicly said they were committed to non-escalation if Pakistan reciprocated. So yeah, the door was open on their side too.
So how did the actual ceasefire agreement come together? It sounds a bit messy.
It does. After Rubio reportedly told India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar that Pakistan had agreed, India insisted the formal proposal had to come through the established military channel, the DGMO hotline. Pakistan's Director General of Military Operations kept trying to reach his Indian counterpart. A brief call finally connected around 1:15 p.m. India time on May 10th.
And that was it. That sealed the deal.
That seems to be when the understanding was finally reached. A formal ceasefire was then in place by 3:03 p.m. India time.
And then President Trump announced a U.S.-mediated ceasefire, mentioning broader talks.
Yes, that came around 8 a.m. U.S. time. India quickly confirmed the ceasefire itself, but publicly pushed back, denying they'd agreed to any specific broader talks or a neutral venue. So yeah, kind of a messy diplomatic end.
So bottom line from the paper, why did it stop when it did?
The paper concludes it was really a combination of factors. Both sides showed some calibration, but there's also the sheer confusion of that final night. Neither side seemed to truly want more fighting. You had India's military pressure making an impact, strong U.S. persuasion offering that off-ramp, and ultimately a mutual calculation that the immense cost and danger of continuing just outweighed any possible political gain. Wow. This deep dive, just based on this one paper's analysis, really highlights the incredible complexity, the confusion, the surprises of those 4 days. You know, from India's deep strikes early on to that mystery around Pakistan's counter-air success.
Right, through the really tragic fighting on line of control and those fast-moving drone duels.
All the way to India's deep penetrations on May 9th and 10th, and then this crucial, absolutely central role the U.S. played in bringing it to an end.
It's just a stark reminder, isn't it, of how quickly things can escalate between nuclear states and how modern technology is constantly changing the face of warfare. And remember, a ceasefire isn't peace. The next crisis, whenever it comes, will inevitably build on the lessons learned or maybe not learned from this one.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you, the listener. Considering everything we've unpacked from this paper's analysis, all the tech, the signaling, the misperceptions, the high-stakes, messy diplomacy, what do you think are the absolutely most critical lessons policymakers must take away right now before the next crisis inevitably arrives?